Thank you very much, Mr. Weimer. That was wonderful. Please open your Bibles to Mark chapter 7. Mark chapter 7 this morning. And I want to tell you a little story. When I was a teenager, yes, I go back that far, church people often viewed morality as something external. You weren't supposed to go to the bar. You weren't supposed to go to the dance hall. You weren't supposed to do this, supposed to do that. In fact, there was a common saying, and there are variations on this saying, but this is how I remember it. Don't smoke, don't dance, don't chew, and don't go with girls who do. Anybody ever heard that? Don't smoke, don't dance, don't chew, and don't go with girls who do. As I have grown in my Christian faith, I have come to realize that morality is not a matter of practicing external do's and don'ts. Morality is primarily an internal matter. This is what Jesus taught, and Mark recorded it in Mark chapter 7, and I want to read it for you. Mark chapter 7, starting with verses 1 to 23. The Pharisees and some of the teachers of the law who had come from Jerusalem gathered around Jesus and saw some of his disciples eating food with hands that were defiled, that is, unwashed. The Pharisees and all the Jews do not eat unless they give their hands a ceremonial washing, holding to the tradition of the elders. When they come from the marketplace, they do not eat unless they wash, and they observe many other traditions, such as the washing of cups, pitchers, and kettles. So the Pharisees and teachers of the law asked Jesus, "Why don't your disciples live according to the tradition of the elders instead of eating their food with defiled hands?" He replied, "Isaiah was right when he prophesied about you hypocrites, as it is written, 'These people honor me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me. They worship me in vain. Their teachings are merely human rules.' You have let go of the command of God and are holding on to human traditions." He continued, "You have a fine way of setting aside the commands of God in order to observe your own traditions. For Moses said, 'Honor your father and mother,' and anyone who curses their father or mother is to be put to death. But you say that if anyone declares that what might have been used to help their father or mother is korban, that is, devoted to God, then you no longer let them do anything for their father or mother. Thus you nullify the word of God by your tradition that you have handed down, and you do many other things, or many things like that." Again, Jesus called the crowd to him and said, "Listen to me, everyone, and understand this. Nothing outside a person can defile them by going into them. Rather, it is what comes out of a person that defiles them." After he had left the crowd and entered the house, his disciples asked him about this parable. "Are you so dull?" he asked. "Don't you see that nothing that enters a person from the outside can defile them, for it doesn't go into their heart, but into their stomach, and then out the body. In saying this, Jesus declared all foods clean. He went on, "What comes out of a person is what defiles them. For it is from within, out of a person's heart, that evil thoughts come. Sexual immorality, theft, murder, adultery, greed, malice, lewdness, envy, slander, arrogance, and folly. All of these evils come from inside and defile a person." May God bless this reading of his holy word. I want us to think to this morning about this confrontation that was taking place. First of all, the Pharisees and the teachers of the law confronted Jesus. Look at verses 1 to 5. The Pharisees had a way of kind of being tattletales. Do you remember what tattletales are like in school? They kind of watch who's doing what, and if somebody does something wrong, "Oh, teacher, teacher!" Well, the Pharisees are kind of like that. They had been watching the disciples, and they noticed that the disciples were eating with unwashed hands. Now, just to calm somebody down, I don't know who it is this morning, but somebody might say, "Well, Pastor Tim, isn't it good to wash your hands?" Just calm down a little bit. This has nothing to do with hygiene. We're not talking about washing your hands with soap and water to stop the spread of germs. That's not what we're talking about this morning. In addition to washing the hygiene way with soap and water to keep your hands clean from dirt, the Jewish people had something that was called ceremonial washing. So you wash your hands with soap and water, that's one thing. But then you had to dip your hands 7 times into different bowls to make sure that your hands were clean. And it was ceremony, it was symbolic, it had nothing to do with making sure your hands were free of germs. It had something to do with saying that all the people out there in the world, in the marketplace, were defiled. They weren't clean like us Jews. And we were better than they. Therefore, when we wash our hands, we're saying, I might have, in the passing of a bill or a coin, I might have gone close to touching a defiled pagan person. And I have to make sure that my hands are clean so that I don't eat my food with defiled hands. That's what Jesus was talking about, and that's what the Pharisees were talking about. The disciples ate food with unwashed hands. It was about this ceremonial washing, and it was about legalistic traditions. Now, the Pharisees thought that the Gentiles were unclean, and their washing of their hands were to indicate superiority. They followed many other Jewish traditions. And they asked Jesus about a question about this washing of hands in verse 5. Why don't your disciples live according to the tradition of the Jewish elders, instead of eating their food with defiled hands? Why are your disciples not following our rules? That's the question. And Jesus is replying in a way of confrontation. Look at verses 6 to 16. The first thing Jesus does is he refers to one of the Old Testament prophets. He refers to Isaiah. And Jesus says Isaiah was right when he prophesied about you hypocrites. Oh, that's not a way to make friends and influence people, Jesus. Called them hypocrites. But why was he calling them hypocrites? He says, these people honor me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me. Have you ever thought about this? I wouldn't accuse anybody of ever doing this in our church, but I've heard that some people sometimes come to church with their cell phones. And some people don't turn their cell phones off, they keep them on. And they're not even looking at the Bible text. Sometimes they are watching a program. Sometimes they're playing a game. Sometimes they're reading a text. Sometimes they're doing all kinds of other things while the pastor is preaching, and the pastor thinks, oh, that's wonderful. He's reading his Bible while I preach. Way to go. And really, their mind isn't here at all. Now, that wouldn't be true of anybody here in Newman, but I've heard it happens in other churches. And do you realize that you can be sitting in church and appear to be worshiping God, and you're not really here? Your body's here, but your mind's not. And even if you don't have a cell phone at church, you can have your mind on the football game. Or you can have your mind on the roast that's in your oven. Oh, I'm stepping on toes, aren't I? And you can have your mind 100 other places. You can have your mind at the royal funeral in England or somewhere else, and not be thinking about our purpose here today is to love each other and love Jesus supremely. You worship me with your lips. Oh yeah, I went to church this morning. But your heart is somewhere else. That's what Jesus said was the problem with these people who were so concentrating on dipping their hands in the right bowls of water. You're getting so focused on the details of what you do in your tradition that you're not even thinking about being pure before God. And that can be a problem for all of us. Jesus quotes Isaiah and he says, these people honor me with their lips, but their hearts are from me. And then he says a second thing from Isaiah. He says, these people worship me for nothing. They worship me in vain. Do you know that some people go to church on Sunday morning and they sing all the right songs and say all the right words, but as soon as they leave the building, they didn't really mean what they said? And it becomes evident. He says, these people worship me in vain. There is no reason for it. It's empty. And their teachings are mere human rules. And there is a time when we can be so interested in controlling the way everybody does something that we can miss the whole point. What's more important, that we control every single little detail, or that our hearts are focused on Jesus and how much we love him above anything else. Where's your heart? Jesus says they have a problem with their worship. They honor me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me. These people worship me for nothing. They only want to keep their traditions. And then he says a third thing. He says, these people do not follow the laws of God. They only follow their rules. See, there's a problem with the laws of God. Do you know what they are? What the problem is? The laws of God tend to be general. And when they're general, we have to say, yeah, but there are loopholes in that. And I have to add 10 more rules to the 10 Commandments, to each one of the 10 Commandments, to make sure you understand what the 10 Commandments really mean. And you laugh at that, but I'm underestimating what the Pharisees did. They added 365 rules to the 10 Commandments that were not written by God. They were written by the Pharisees. One rule for each day of the year. And as soon as we add rules to God's rules, they're no longer God's rules, they're our rules. And as soon as we fault somebody else for not keeping those rules, we're faulting somebody else not for not obeying God, but for not obeying us. And all of a sudden, we become God. And that's the first thing, that's the first sin that was committed by Satan. He wanted to be God. And we become, by making all these rules, by making all these regulations, by making people follow us, we become God and we become sinning against God. And that's what Jesus is challenging here. Not only did he quote Isaiah, Jesus also quoted Moses, as recorded in Exodus chapter 20, verse 12. He says, I'll read chapter 7, verse 9. He says, you have a fine way of setting aside the commands of God in order to observe your own traditions. For Moses, verse 10, said, honor your father and mother, and anyone who curses their father and mother is to be put to death. This is God's word. God's word is that we should honor our fathers and mothers. Now, what did the Pharisees do with it? Well, Jesus tells us what they did. But you say, verse 11, that if anyone declares what they might have used to help their father or mother is korban, then you no longer let them do anything for their father and mother. Now, what's this thing about korban? Korban was a designated offering. Korban was saying that if I get a bonus in my paycheck, or if I get some extra money that I've saved, and I say that is korban, it's dedicated to God for church use. Maybe I'll donate it to the building fund, or maybe I'll donate it to something else. Korban means that it's dedicated to God. But if I have a father or mother who needs to be cared for, I'm not going to take money out of my regular salary. The money that I would have used to take care of my mom and dad, I've already dedicated to God. So mom and dad, I'm sorry, I don't have anything left for you. I have stuff left for me. I gave stuff to God, but mom and dad, I don't have anything left for you. It's all spent. And Jesus says that is immoral. That is a way of getting around the Ten Commandments and making your own rules. You are not honoring your father and mother. You are not really honoring God for this gift that you supposedly gave to God. You're doing your own thing to excuse yourself from taking care of your parents financially, which you are responsible to do. That's what Jesus was saying. He says, you set aside the commands of God. You observe your own traditions in their place. And guess what? Jesus says, by doing this, you are ignoring God's law. You're just making selfish excuses. And he says, you do many things like this. No, we wouldn't ever do anything like that. What about when we say that we're giving money to God, but we're only doing it for a tax deduction? Could I challenge you? If there were no tax deductions in our country, would you still give to God? And I'm not exaggerating by saying that, because there are countries in our world where people don't get tax deductions. And if the only reason you give to God is to get your tax deduction, then you're not really giving to God. Sit on that one for a minute. So Jesus has a confrontation with the Pharisees. The Pharisees think Jesus' disciples aren't obeying their rules, and Jesus says, you're more interested in obeying your rules than obeying God. And then in verses 14 to 16, Jesus teaches the crowd. Jesus calls them to attention. He says, listen to me, everyone. You really need to understand this. And then he says in verse 15, nothing outside a person can defile them by going into them. Rather, it is what comes out of a person that defiles them. Everybody's so interested in what they eat. And just calm down for a minute. It is important for our health that we eat healthy. I'll agree with that, and I don't think Jesus is attacking this. But what Jesus is saying is what you put into your body isn't a spiritual matter. What you put into your body goes in one side and out the other side. That's not the spiritual matter. It's what you allow your heart, the passion, the place of passions inside of you. It's what you allow yourself to think about and to believe and to stress. That is what is the difference. The matter of the heart, or the heart of the matter is the matter of the heart. That's what's important. And if you get the heart wrong, you get it all wrong. We are not defiled by what comes from the outside in. We are defiled by what comes from the inside out. And then there's an interesting little thing with verse 16. Verse 16 is not actually found in the original text. It was added by some scribes. It is found in other texts. It's the if you have ears, let them hear. That's found in other passages, but not in the original text for this one. So verse 16 is missing in a sense. So Jesus taught the crowd, and then he gets more specific with his disciples, verse 17. After he had left the crowd and entered the house, his disciples asked him about the parable. They thought this statement about nothing can defile them by going into you, rather what comes out of you is what defiles you. They thought that was a parable. And they said, "What does that parable mean?" And Jesus was even surprised that they would ask that question. He says, "Don't you see that nothing that enters a person from the outside can defile them? For it doesn't go into the heart, but it goes into the stomach, and then out the body." And then Mark adds this little statement in the brackets in my translation. It says, "In saying this, Jesus declared all foods clean." Guess what? You can eat whatever nature presents to be eaten. Isn't that wonderful? All foods clean. Do you know how many laws the Jewish people had about eating? Lots of laws. And Jesus was challenging those laws, and he's saying, you're free to eat anything you want to. How dare Jesus said that? Wait a minute. Jesus is God. He had the right to say that. And he said, well, I don't think that just this one comment by Mark is good enough. Well, let me give you another one. Have you ever read Acts chapter 10? In Acts chapter 10, the gospel was spreading beyond the Jewish people to the Gentile people. And there was a man named Cornelius that was a Gentile that was coming to meet Peter. And Peter was the staunch Jewish person. He wanted to do everything the Jewish way. And God gave Peter a vision, and he let Peter see all these unclean animals on a cot. And they came down on this cot right in front of Peter. And God caused Peter to see these animals. And then he said to Peter, go, kill, and eat. And Peter nearly had a conniption. He says, you got to be kidding, Lord. You don't mean this. No, Lord, I can't eat those dirty animals. Do you realize that there's a problem in what Peter said? Anytime a believer in Jesus says, no, Lord, there's a conflict. When the Lord tells us to do something, the only proper response is to say, yes, Lord. And the Lord was telling Peter the same thing that Mark is observing right here. All foods are clean. God gives us the freedom to eat whatever you want. Now, let's do the other side. Not all foods might be healthy for you. For example, I have high blood pressure problem, and if I eat food with high salt content, I could get myself in trouble. So I try not to eat food that has a lot of salt in it, and not to add salt to my food. That's just an example. That's for my health reasons. I don't say, thou shalt not eat salt, and no Christian in this room should ever eat salt. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying, for my physical need, I should eat less salt. So that's that. And you can do that with gluten and all kinds of other things. But it cannot be elevated to a spiritual morality issue. That's what Jesus is saying. All foods are clean. And then Jesus went on And he says, what comes out of a person is what defiles them. For it is from within, out of a person's heart, that evil thoughts come. Have you ever struggled with evil thoughts? I have. And evil thoughts are the core of evil. Evil actions come from evil thoughts. And Jesus says it was from within a person's heart that evil thoughts come. And if somebody commits sexual immorality, guess what? They've had some evil thoughts. If somebody commits theft, they've had some evil thoughts. If somebody commits murder, they've had some evil thoughts. If somebody commits adultery, they've had some evil thoughts. If somebody is greedy, they have evil thoughts. If somebody is malice, a bad anger towards other people, that's evil thoughts. Deceit, you have to lie to somebody to get away with something, that's evil thoughts. Lewdness, that's looking like you want to show off your sexual body. Lewdness, evil thoughts. Envy, evil thoughts. Slander, speaking evil against other people, that's evil thoughts. Arrogance and folly all come from evil thoughts. And your problem is not what you do, but what you think, and what you think influences what you do in the wrong way. And it all comes from your heart. It doesn't come from your stomach, it comes from your heart. A symbol, the heart there is a symbol of what your passions, your inner desires. All these evils come from inside and defile a person. So what's Jesus saying? Jesus is saying that the heart of the problem is not how you wash your hands. It's not how you act to impress others. The heart of the problem is the problem of the heart. Spiritual cleanliness is an inside job. I don't know if any of you were around in the early 70s in Christian music, but there was a group called Chuck Bolte and the Jeremiah People. And they had a song that I heard. It was Where Your Heart Is. Listen to these words. I guess it all comes down to where your heart is. That's where your thoughts and feelings all begin. And if you've never given your heart to Jesus, you'll never really know true peace within. That's what it comes down to. Not the externals. Not what we do to please others, but the internals. Do you love Jesus? Is your heart right? If it's not right, Jesus is about cleaning dirty hearts. He wants to clean your heart and mind. And if it is right, then you will live right, because how you live is impacted by how you love. If you love Jesus, it will show in how you live. Let's pray. Lord, thank you for this understanding of what it means to be clean. Give us clean hearts so that we can love you with all of our hearts, with pure hearts that focus on you. Thank you for your word. Impress it on us today. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.